Hello again. I spoke the other day about the reason why I don't delete comments made here about the Holocaust and about Jews and so on. Uh, it's a very tricky topic. In Germany and Austria, as well as some other European countries, people can be sent to prison for questioning or denying the Holocaust. Some people say that this should also be the situation in Britain, and that the Holocaust is so uniquely awful that special sensitivity should surround it, and nobody should doubt it, lest people happen to be upset. For that reason, I think that the sight of some of the comments here is particularly unpleasant to some people. I'm thinking now of things like wooden doors, which is meant to suggest that the gas chambers at places like Treblinka and Sobibor wouldn't really work. I was prompted to think of all this by the publication of a paperback edition of this book of mine, which is called Secret Casualties of World War Two. It was published a few years ago and now it's come out in a paperback edition. As I am sure most viewers will know, the Blitz in 1940, the bombing of London by the Germans, occupies a very special place in this country's history, and we still talk of the Blitz spirit. Just as with the Holocaust, nobody wants some smart aleck to come along and start challenging the accepted narrative. It's part of this country's mythology. I know that in everyday use the word myth is now almost synonymous with misconception or even lie. When we describe something as a myth, we are often, in effect, saying that it's untrue. We are, in this way, robbed of a very useful word with a specific meaning quite unconnected with falsehood or truth, which is unfortunate. Some myths are, of course, untrue. Others, though, are no more than straightforward and accurate historical accounts. Myths are really stories or narratives which help us to make sense of the world and understand our place in it. In that sense, the story of Britain standing alone against the might of Nazi Germany and being bombed relentlessly night after night is a mythic narrative. In precisely the same way, the Holocaust is part of the mythic narrative of the Jewish people, just like the Exodus from Egypt and so on. In that book of mine, I show that many of those who were killed during the Blitz on London really died because the British artillery, which was being fired at the capital, caused a lot of the casualties. Anti-aircraft guns used during the war were really heavy artillery. They hurled shells weighing up to 80 pounds up into the air, where some of them exploded, but others fell to the ground in the middle of London and exploded there instead. Even those which did explode overhead rained heavy chunks of metal down on the city. This is the nose cone of a shell, which was fired by a 3.5-inch anti-aircraft gun. It weighs about £2. This is just the nose cone. It's made in 1940, this one. Imagine for a moment something like this, weighing £2, big chunk of steel. Okay, the shell explodes up in the air and all the pieces fall down. Nose cones like that fell down from thousands of feet up in the air, and by the time they near the ground, they would go straight through a roof. There were cases of people being killed in their beds by things like this just falling straight through the roof and hitting them on the head. My grandfather served in the Horse Artillery during the Great War, and in 1939 he was recalled to the colours. He was an artilleryman, and he manned an artillery post in Chadwell Heath in East London, which is how I happen to have this from one of the shells that was fired there that came down to earth again. When you remember that as many as 13,000 such heavy shells were fired into the air over London every night, and that many of them had defective fuses and didn't explode until they landed, you can see the havoc that was caused. Thousands of those killed during the Blitz were actually victims of the British artillery rather than the bombs of the Luftwaffe. I mention this to explain why I do not think Holocaust denial should be against the law, and I think people should be able to say what they wish about this matter. A lot of people are annoyed and angry to see my criticism of the accepted narrative of the Blitz, and I've become very unpopular in some quarters as a result of that book. However, it would be grotesque if I were not allowed to ask questions and write an alternative history to that which is generally accepted and taught in schools when it comes to the Second World War. This is exactly comparable to questioning or even denying the Holocaust. Every historical event is subject to investigation and differing opinions. Imagine if a law was passed which made it illegal to question the narrative of the Blitz. Would anybody support such a move? I'm guessing not. There must never be any limit set on what people can ask questions about or offer their own interpretation of. This is how we discover truth. I must end by saying that although I think that people should be free to challenge the Holocaust, as indeed people do here in some comments, I myself have not the slightest doubt about the orthodox narrative, and I've studied the subject for many years, quite long enough to satisfy myself of the truth of the matter. And for this reason, I shall not be engaging with anybody in the comments who mentions wooden doors or any other aspect of the thing. I'm talking here about a general principle, both of free speech, but also of historical inquiry. Fencing off one part of history and telling people they're not to ask awkward questions or challenge some subject always backfires in the long run. Truth needs no laws to protect it.